I sat at my childhood dining table watching my parents, Margaret and Robert Wilson, discuss their struggling tech company, Wilson Dynamics. My younger brother Bradley announced he had invited their mysterious $5 billion anonymous investor to dinner tonight to show me what real success looks like. My stomach churned as I realized they had no idea I was that investor. For 3 years, I had secretly funded their company through shell corporations, while they treated me like a failure. Tonight, my carefully constructed double life would explode in their faces. The weight of tonight's revelation pressed against my chest as I watched Bradley adjust his tie with that familiar smirk. He had no idea what storm was coming. But to understand how we reached this moment, I need to take you back to where it all began 5 years ago, when my family first decided I was worthless. I was 22 when I dropped out of Stanford during my junior year. Not because I was failing, mind you, but because I had discovered something revolutionary in artificial intelligence that couldn't wait for graduation ceremonies and academic bureaucracy. My parents reacted as if I had burned down their house. Robert, my father, was a traditionalist who believed success only came through established institutions and proven pathways. Margaret, my mother, simply couldn't comprehend why her son would throw away an Ivy League education. The family meeting where they cut me off financially remains seared in my memory. Robert sat behind his mahogany desk like a judge delivering a verdict. Margaret stood beside him, her arms crossed, wearing that expression of disappointed authority I had seen countless times growing up. Bradley lounged in the leather chair beside me, barely containing his glee at watching his older brother fall from grace. Theodore. Robert began, his voice carrying the cold formality he used with failed business partners. Your mother and I have discussed your reckless decision extensively. We cannot and will not support someone who throws away opportunities we worked decades to provide. Margaret nodded sharply. You had everything handed to you on a silver platter, and you chose to spit in our faces. If you think you're so smart that you can succeed without education, without guidance, without family support, then prove it. But you'll do it without a penny from us. Bradley actually chuckled. Come on, Mom and Dad. Theodore will be back within 6 months begging for help. He's never had to work for anything real in his life. The moment he runs out of money for his little computer games, reality will hit him like a freight train. They were wrong about almost everything, but right about one thing: reality did hit me like a freight train, just not in the way they expected. I moved into a cramped studio apartment in downtown San Jose, surviving on peanut butter sandwiches and instant coffee while developing my AI algorithm. My parents had trained me well. In one respect, I understood the value of persistence and hard work. What they failed to grasp was that I had inherited their business acumen along with their stubborn determination. 18 months later, when Google, Microsoft, and Apple entered a bidding war for my artificial intelligence platform, I sold to the highest bidder for $1.2 billion. At 24 years old, I had achieved more financial success than my father had accumulated in his entire career. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Instead of rushing home to gloat or demand apologies, I made a choice that would define the next 3 years of my life. I decided to watch and wait. Through careful research, I discovered that Wilson Dynamics was hemorrhaging money. My parents had built their reputation on manufacturing precision components for aerospace companies, but they were losing contracts to overseas competitors with newer technology and lower costs. Within 18 months, they would face bankruptcy. Meanwhile, Bradley had joined the family business straight from Harvard Business School, bringing with him all the arrogance and none of the innovation the company desperately needed. My parents praised him constantly, calling him the future of Wilson Dynamics, their brilliant younger son who understood the value of education and family loyalty. The irony tasted bitter every time I visited for awkward holiday dinners. They would ask about my little tech projects, with barely concealed condescension, while celebrating Bradley's latest cost-cutting initiative or process improvement. They had no idea that their despised dropout son could buy and sell their entire company with pocket change. Instead of revealing my success, I created Alexander Holdings, a complex web of shell corporations and investment vehicles, designed to appear completely separate from Theodore Wilson. I began quietly purchasing distressed properties near Wilson Dynamics manufacturing facilities, converting them into modern production centers with cutting-edge equipment. I hired brilliant engineers and designers, offering them salaries that attracted talent from major tech companies. Then, I approached Wilson Dynamics as a mysterious investor interested in modernizing their operations. My parents were skeptical at first, but when I offered to lease them state-of-the-art facilities at below-market rates and provide access to advanced manufacturing technologies, they couldn't refuse. Their company began showing profits for the first time in years. Robert and Margaret attributed their sudden turnaround to Bradley's leadership and their own business wisdom. They never questioned why a multi-billion-dollar investment firm would take such personal interest in a small manufacturing company in Ohio. Bradley basked in the credit-giving interviews to trade publications about his innovative management strategies and forward-thinking approach to manufacturing. The praise made me sick, but I endured it because I could see the relief in my parents' faces. They were sleeping better, arguing less, and slowly rebuilding the confidence that years of declining business had eroded. My anonymous investments were saving their company, their marriage, and their sense of self-worth. But the real gut punch came last month when they announced they were selling the family home where I had grown up. Margaret explained it matter-of-factly during one of our monthly obligation dinners. "We're tired of supporting a failure," she said, not even looking at me. "Bradley is doing so well with the company, and we want to downsize so we can help him buy his first house. You understand, don't you, Theodore? We need to invest in success, not waste money on lost causes." That same week, I had quietly become the majority shareholder of Wilson Dynamics, owning 51% of the company they thought Bradley was leading to greatness. I controlled every major decision, approved every significant contract, and could fire anyone, including my own brother, with a single phone call. Tonight's dinner represented Bradley's masterpiece of cruelty. He had convinced our parents that the anonymous investor wanted to meet the family disappointment as entertainment. He had prepared a presentation comparing my supposed failures with his achievements, designed to humiliate me in front of the person who was unknowingly me. As I watched him practice his speech in the living room, gesturing dramatically while describing my pathetic coffee shop job and beaten Honda Civic, I felt something shift inside me. The time for hiding was over. Tonight, Bradley would get his meeting with the mysterious investor. He just had no idea he was about to come face to face with his biggest nightmare. The doorbell would ring in exactly 4 hours, and when it did, everything would change forever. Bradley strutted around the dining room like a peacock, displaying his plumage, adjusting the PowerPoint presentation he had prepared for tonight's humiliation festival. At 28, my younger brother had perfected the art of casual cruelty, and tonight represented his masterwork of psychological warfare. "This is going to be legendary," he said to our parents, clicking through slides that detailed my supposed failures with scientific precision. "I've documented everything: where Theodore works, what he drives, where he lives. The investor specifically asked to meet our family's underachiever. Can you imagine? He probably wants to use Theodore as an example of what happens when people lack ambition and intelligence." Margaret beamed at Bradley with the kind of maternal pride she had never shown me. "You're so thoughtful to arrange this, sweetheart. It's important for successful people to see the full spectrum of achievement. Theodore might actually learn something from observing real accomplishment." Robert nodded approvingly. "This investor has been transforming our company. If he wants to meet Theodore, perhaps he can provide some guidance. Sometimes external perspective helps people understand their limitations and find more suitable paths." I maintained my poker face while rage simmered beneath the surface. For 3 years, I had watched Bradley take credit for innovations and improvements that came directly from my investments and strategic guidance. He had no idea that every successful initiative he claimed as his own had been carefully orchestrated by the brother he considered a failure. But tonight's revelation would expose something far worse than Bradley's arrogance and my parents' favoritism. Through my access to Wilson Dynamics financial systems, I had discovered that Bradley was embezzling from the company. He had created fake consulting contracts with non-existent firms, inflated supplier costs by 30%, and pocketed the difference, and approved fraudulent overtime payments to fictional employees. Over the past 18 months, Bradley had stolen over $200,000 from the family business. He used the money to finance his downtown condo, his Tesla Model S, and his expensive wardrobe that helped maintain his image as a successful young executive. Meanwhile, I had been quietly covering these losses through additional investments, essentially funding my own humiliation while protecting my parents from their golden child's theft. The best part, Bradley continued, warming to his theme, is that I've been documenting Theodore's daily routine for months. I have photos of him serving coffee, pictures of that pathetic Honda he drives, even shots of the cramped apartment building where he lives. The contrast between his poverty and our success will be absolutely stunning. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through dozens of surveillance photos. There I was wearing my barista uniform at Grind Coffee, the shop I had purchased 6 months ago as part of a broader investment strategy in local businesses. Bradley had captured me washing dishes, taking orders, and cleaning tables, never realizing he was photographing the owner, not an employee. Another series showed me getting into the beaten Honda Civic that belonged to my building's parking garage attendant. I borrowed it occasionally to maintain my cover, while my actual vehicles, including a customized Tesla Roadster and a vintage Porsche, remained safely hidden in my penthouse garage. The apartment building photos made me smile internally. Bradley had spent hours documenting the exterior of a low-income housing complex where I had never lived. My actual residence was a $40 million penthouse in the city's most exclusive building, purchased under one of my corporate entities. "Look at this," Bradley said, showing our parents a particularly unflattering shot of me carrying garbage bags to a dumpster. "This is what happens when people think they're too good for education and family guidance. Theodore could have had everything, but his arrogance led him to this pathetic existence." Margaret shook her head sadly. "It breaks my heart to see what he's become. We tried so hard to instill proper values, but some people just can't accept help or guidance. At least we have you, Bradley. You've exceeded every expectation and made us so proud." Robert studied the photos with business-like analysis. "The investor will probably find this fascinating from a psychological perspective. Theodore represents a cautionary tale about the consequences of poor decision-making. Perhaps this experience will shock him into reconsidering his life choices." What they didn't know was that I had been reconsidering my life choices for months. The constant humiliation, the credit taken for my work, and the discovery of Bradley's embezzlement had pushed me toward a decision I had been avoiding. Tonight would force my hand earlier than planned, but perhaps that was for the best. Bradley's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and grinned maliciously. "Perfect timing. The investor just confirmed he'll arrive at 7:30 sharp. Theodore. I hope you're prepared to meet someone who actually understands success. This might be the most educational evening of your pathetic life." He turned to our parents with theatrical concern. "I just want to make sure Theodore doesn't embarrass us too badly. Maybe we should establish some ground rules. Like, he shouldn't speak unless directly addressed, and he definitely shouldn't offer any opinions about business or investments. We don't want our guest to think the whole family lacks intelligence." Margaret agreed immediately. "Excellent suggestion. Theodore, you'll serve drinks and clear plates, but otherwise remain quiet and observe. This is a tremendous opportunity for you to witness real achievement and perhaps gain some insight into what success actually looks like." The setup was perfect. They expected me to serve dinner to myself while they praised Bradley for accomplishments built on my anonymous investments. The irony was so thick it could be cut with a knife. But Bradley wasn't finished with his preparations. He had one final twist planned that would make tonight's revelation even more explosive. As I listened to him outline his strategy, I realized that my brother's cruelty ran deeper than I had ever imagined. "There's something else," Bradley said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I've been telling people around town that Theodore might be mentally unstable. Nothing too serious, just enough to explain his bizarre life choices and antisocial behavior. I suggested that Mom and Dad might want to have him evaluated by a professional. My blood turned to ice. Bradley wasn't content with simple humiliation. He wanted to destroy my credibility and reputation completely. By spreading rumors about my mental health, he was attempting to isolate me from any potential support system and ensure that even if I tried to reveal the truth about my success, people would dismiss it as delusional fantasy. Margaret looked troubled. "Do you really think that's necessary? Theodore has always been different, but mentally unstable seems extreme." "Think about it logically," Bradley pressed. "What rational person drops out of an elite university to play with computers in a garage who refuses family help and support when they're obviously struggling? The behavior pattern suggests someone who's lost touch with reality. I'm not saying we need to take action immediately, but we should consider professional intervention if his condition deteriorates further." Robert nodded slowly. "You might be right. Theodore's refusal to acknowledge his failures or accept help does seem increasingly disconnected from reality. Perhaps after tonight's meeting, we'll have a clearer picture of how serious the problem has become." They were discussing having me committed to psychiatric evaluation based on Bradley's lies and manipulation. The depth of his malice was staggering, but it also represented the final straw that shattered any remaining reluctance I felt about exposing the truth. Bradley checked his watch and smiled with satisfaction. 2 hours until showtime. Theodore, you might want to practice looking grateful and respectful. This investor has been incredibly generous to our family, and the least you can do is show proper appreciation for his willingness to meet someone so far beneath his station. As I watched my brother put the finishing touches on his elaborate humiliation ceremony, I felt a calm settle over me that I hadn't experienced in years. The time for hiding was over. The time for protecting people who treated me like garbage was finished. Tonight, Bradley would get his meeting with the mysterious investor who had transformed Wilson Dynamics. He just had no idea that investor was about to transform his entire world. The clock struck 5:30, and I knew I had exactly 2 hours to prepare for the most important performance of my life. I excused myself from the family gathering with my usual mumbled explanation about needing to change clothes after my coffee shop shift. "Don't take too long," Bradley called after me with mock concern. "Our guest arrives at 7:30 sharp, and we need you here to serve drinks and clear plates. Try to look presentable, even if that's challenging given your limited wardrobe options." I nodded submissively and headed for my beaten Honda, or rather, the Honda that belonged to my building's parking attendant, Frank Martinez. Frank was a 60-year-old former Marine who managed the parking garage at my penthouse complex. He had been covering for me for months, allowing me to borrow his vehicle whenever I needed to maintain my false identity as struggling Theodore. The drive to downtown took 25 minutes through rush hour traffic. My actual residence was a $40 million penthouse, occupying the top 2 floors of the city's most exclusive residential tower. The building featured private elevators, a rooftop helipad, and security measures that rivaled government facilities. As I rode the express elevator to the 52nd floor, I mentally prepared for the transformation ahead. Tonight, I would shed the carefully cultivated image of Theodore, the failure, and reveal Alexander Holdings' true representative, Theodore, the billionaire. My penthouse apartment reflected none of the modest lifestyle I portrayed to my family. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city skyline. Italian marble floors led to custom-designed living spaces filled with museum-quality art and furniture worth more than most people's houses. My walk-in closet contained handcrafted suits from London's finest tailors, each costing more than Bradley's monthly salary. I selected a charcoal gray Savile Row suit with subtle pinstripes paired with a white shirt that had been custom-made by artisans in Milan. Italian leather shoes that had been fitted specifically to my feet completed the ensemble. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was fumbling coffee shop Theodore, replaced by a figure who commanded respect in boardrooms and investment meetings. But physical appearance was only part of the preparation. I spent 30 minutes reviewing my comprehensive dossier on Wilson Dynamics, refreshing my memory on every detail of the company's operations, finances, and strategic initiatives. As Alexander Holdings' representative, I needed to demonstrate intimate knowledge of the business that would be impossible to fake. My personal assistant, Sarah Chen, had been managing the logistics of tonight's revelation for weeks. Sarah was a brilliant Harvard MBA who had chosen to work for me, rather than accept offers from Goldman Sachs and McKinsey. She understood the complexity of maintaining my dual identity and had helped orchestrate every aspect of my anonymous investment strategy. At 6:15, my phone rang with an urgent call from Sarah. Her voice carried immediate panic. "Theodore, we have a problem. I accidentally sent the dinner confirmation to your Theodore Wilson email address instead of the Alexander Holdings account. If anyone in your family checks their email and sees the confirmation, they'll know something's wrong with the timing." My stomach dropped. This kind of mistake could unravel everything before I had a chance to control the revelation. "How long ago did you send it?" 15 minutes. I realized the error immediately and tried to recall the message, but it had already been delivered. The confirmation shows Alexander Holdings responding from your personal email account with your real name visible in the sender field. I checked my watch. 45 minutes until I needed to arrive at my parents' house. "Meet me at the Wilson Dynamics offices immediately. We need to access their email server and delete that message before anyone sees it." Sarah was already in her car when I called. "I'll be there in 12 minutes. Do you have the administrative passwords for their system?" "I have something better. I own the company. Every system, every password, every security protocol ultimately reports to me through Alexander Holdings' controlling interest." The Wilson Dynamics building stood empty at this hour, its parking lot deserted, except for the security guard's vehicle. My executive access card opened every door and disabled every alarm. Sarah and I rushed to the third-floor IT department where banks of servers hummed quietly in climate-controlled rooms. "There," Sarah said, pointing to the email server configuration. "I can trace the message delivery and remove it from their inboxes before anyone opens it. But we need to hurry. Your mother has email notifications enabled on her phone." My fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing administrative controls that most employees didn't know existed. Within minutes, we had located the problematic message and deleted it from all recipient accounts. But as we prepared to leave, Sarah discovered something that made my blood run cold. "Theodore, look at this log entry. Your mother accessed her email 18 minutes ago, right after my message was delivered. She may have already seen the confirmation." We pulled up Margaret's email activity and found the devastating evidence. She had opened the message, read it for 37 seconds, and then forwarded it to Robert with a note. "Strange, why would Alexander Holdings respond from someone named Theodore Wilson? Isn't that our son's name?" Robert replied 3 minutes later. Sarah continued reading. "He said it was probably a coincidence, but suggested they ask the investor about it tonight. Theodore, they're suspicious about the name connection." My carefully orchestrated revelation was crumbling before it had even begun. Instead of controlling the timing and presentation of my identity, I would now face immediate scrutiny and skepticism. My parents would be expecting an explanation for the email coincidence, and any fumbling or hesitation would raise additional questions. But as we raced through the building toward the exit, Sarah accidentally triggered something that made our situation even more complicated. While deleting the email traces, she had activated an automatic reply system that sent confirmation receipts to all external messages. The system generated a response that included Alexander Holdings' complete contact information, including the address of my penthouse building. "That's not necessarily bad," I said, thinking quickly. "If they research the address, they'll see it's the most expensive residential building in the city. That supports the image of a wealthy, successful investor." Sarah shook her head. "Theodore, your mother responded to the automatic message 15 minutes ago. She said they were looking forward to meeting Mr. Wilson and asked if he was related to their son Theodore, who has the same name. She also mentioned that she found it interesting how successful people often have similar names to ordinary folks." The irony was suffocating. My mother had unknowingly engaged in email correspondence with her own son while expressing amazement at the coincidence of shared names. She had no idea she was discussing Theodore the supposed failure with Theodore the billionaire investor. "There's more," Sarah continued, checking her phone for additional messages. "Your father sent a follow-up email asking about the investor's background and business experience. He wants to discuss potential expansion opportunities and mentioned that their son Theodore had always been interested in technology, though he lacked the intelligence and discipline to succeed in that field." Robert Wilson had literally told his billionaire son that his son lacked the intelligence to succeed in technology, while asking that same son for advice on business expansion. The surreal nature of the situation would have been amusing if the stakes weren't so enormous. As we left the building, I realized that tonight's revelation would be far more complex than originally planned. Instead of simply walking through the door as a surprise, I would need to address their suspicions about the name connection while maintaining credibility as a legitimate investor. Any misstep would destroy not only my cover, but also my ability to help the family business and expose Bradley's embezzlement. The clock in my Tesla showed 7:15 as I raced back toward my parents' house. In 15 minutes, I would knock on their door as Alexander Holdings's representative. But unlike the controlled revelation I had planned, I would now face a family primed with suspicion and armed with questions I wasn't prepared to answer. The dinner that was supposed to humiliate Theodore, the failure was about to become something far more dangerous, a test of whether Theodore the billionaire could maintain his double life under unexpected scrutiny. I parked Frank's Honda 3 blocks away from my parents' house and walked through the familiar neighborhood where I had grown up. Every step brought back memories of a childhood spent trying to earn approval from people who seemed determined to withhold it. Tonight, that dynamic would finally shift. The Wilson family home sat on a tree-lined street in suburbia, a modest colonial that Robert and Margaret had purchased 30 years ago when they were young and ambitious. The mortgage had been paid off for nearly a decade, yet they were selling it to help fund Bradley's future while abandoning any support for mine. I knocked on the front door at exactly 7:25, my transformation from coffee shop Theodore to investor Theodore now complete. Through the frosted glass, I could see figures moving frantically inside. Margaret's voice carried sharp instructions about last-minute preparations, while Robert's deeper tones offered reassurance. Bradley opened the door wearing his most expensive suit and the kind of confident smile that politicians practice in mirrors. His expression changed rapidly as recognition dawned. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally something approaching terror as the implications became clear. "Theodore," he stammered, his voice cracking slightly. "What are you doing here? The investor is supposed to arrive any minute." I smiled calmly and extended my hand in a professional greeting. "Good evening, Bradley. I'm here representing Alexander Holdings for our scheduled dinner meeting. I believe you've been expecting me." The color drained from Bradley's face as he processed what I had just said. Behind him, Margaret appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. She froze when she saw me standing at the door in my expensive suit, looking nothing like the struggling coffee shop worker she knew. "Theodore," she called uncertainly, "why are you dressed like that? And why are you here so early? Our business meeting isn't supposed to start until you arrive to serve." Her voice trailed off as understanding began to dawn. Robert emerged from the living room carrying a folder of business documents. He stopped short when he saw me, his eyes taking in every detail of my transformation: the handcrafted suit, the confident posture, the expensive watch, the aura of someone accustomed to wielding power. "I don't understand," Robert said slowly. "Theodore, why do you look like—" He paused, unwilling to voice what seemed impossible. I stepped into the house without waiting for an invitation, my presence filling the entryway with an authority none of them had ever seen from me. "Perhaps we should sit down. We have quite a lot to discuss tonight." Margaret clutched Robert's arm, her face pale with confusion. "This doesn't make sense. You're our son. You work at a coffee shop. You drive that old Honda. You live in that tiny apartment. How are you here representing a billion-dollar investment company? Bradley found his voice, though it shook with desperate denial. This is some kind of joke or scam. Theodore, whatever game you're playing, it stops now. You're embarrassing yourself and insulting our family's intelligence. The real investor will be here any moment. I pulled out my phone and showed them the email thread between Alexander Holdings and Wilson Dynamics, including messages they had never seen. The real investor is already here, Bradley. I am Alexander Holdings' primary representative, and I've been managing your company's transformation for the past 3 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret sank into a chair, her face cycling through emotions too complex to name. Robert stared at the phone screen, reading emails that proved what seemed impossible. Bradley stood frozen, his mind apparently unable to process the reversal of everything he thought he knew. "That's impossible," Margaret finally whispered. "You're our failure. You're the son who threw away his education and disappointed us at every turn. You can't be the person who saved our company." "The person who saved your company," I corrected gently, "is the same son you've been calling a failure for 5 years. The same Theodore you've humiliated, dismissed, and emotionally abandoned. The same brother Bradley has been planning to humiliate tonight in front of the mysterious investor who turns out to be me." Bradley's shock transformed into rage as he grasped for any explanation that preserved his worldview. "You're lying. This is some elaborate con game. You probably stole someone's identity or hacked into their email system. Losers don't become billionaires overnight, Theodore. The math doesn't work." I maintained my calm demeanor while producing additional evidence. "Would you like to see the patents for the artificial intelligence platform I sold to Google? Or perhaps the incorporation documents for the shell corporations I created to invest in Wilson Dynamics? I have 3 years of financial records proving every transaction." Robert examined the documents with increasing amazement. "These numbers. Theodore. These investments represent hundreds of millions of dollars. Where did this money come from? I developed revolutionary AI technology in that garage you all mocked. When I sold the platform for $1.2 billion at age 24, I became one of the youngest billionaires in American history. Instead of flaunting my success, I chose to help my family anonymously while observing how you treated the son you considered worthless." Margaret began crying, though whether from shame, confusion, or relief was unclear. "Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us worry about money and struggle with the business when you could have helped openly?" "Because," I said, my voice carrying years of accumulated pain, "I wanted to see if you could love Theodore, the person, not Theodore, the bank account. I needed to know whether your rejection was based on who I was or what I had achieved." Tonight's dinner was supposed to answer that question definitively. Bradley refused to accept the evidence before him. He pulled out his phone and showed them the surveillance photos he had collected. "Look at this. I have pictures of Theodore working at that coffee shop, driving that beat-up Honda, living in poverty. This has to be some kind of twin brother situation or identity theft." I smiled at his desperation. "The coffee shop is called Grind Coffee, and I own it. I purchased the business 6 months ago as part of a broader investment strategy in local enterprises. The Honda belongs to Frank Martinez, the parking attendant at my building. I borrow it occasionally to maintain the cover identity that fooled you so thoroughly." "What building?" Robert asked, though his voice suggested he was beginning to fear the answer. "The Meridian Tower, penthouse floors 51 and 52. I purchased the space for $40 million and had it customized to my specifications. Would you like to see the deed, Sai?" The revelation hit them like physical blows. The Meridian Tower was the city's most exclusive residential address, home to celebrities, tech moguls, and international business leaders. They had driven past it countless times, never imagining their failure son owned the most expensive residence in the building. Bradley made one final desperate attempt to maintain his version of reality. "Even if this is all true, which I seriously doubt, it proves you never loved us. You tortured us for years, watching us struggle when you could have helped. You're a psychopath who played sick games with his own family." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Margaret looked up at me with new fear in her eyes, as if seeing me for the first time. Robert's expression hardened with something approaching anger. Bradley had found the one attack that might succeed where denial had failed. But he had also given me the opening I needed to reveal the final truth that would shatter his credibility forever. "You want to talk about torture?" "Bradley," I said, my voice remaining steady despite the fury building inside me. "Let's discuss the $200,000 you've embezzled from Wilson Dynamics over the past 18 months. Should I show them the fake consulting contracts, the inflated supplier invoices, or the fraudulent overtime payments you've been approving for non-existent employees?" The room went silent except for the sound of Bradley's ragged breathing. Margaret and Robert turned to stare at their golden child, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in years. "That's impossible," Robert said weakly. "Bradley would never steal from the family business." I produced a tablet loaded with financial evidence. "These are bank records showing payments from Wilson Dynamics to fictitious consulting firms that Bradley created. The money was transferred to personal accounts he established under false business names. Every transaction is documented and traceable." Margaret's tears stopped as cold realization set in. "Bradley, is this true?" Bradley's face had gone ashen, but he still fought desperately to deflect blame. "Even if some accounting irregularities exist, they're not intentional. Theodore is trying to frame me because he's jealous of my success and your love for me. This is revenge for years of being the family disappointment." $200,000 isn't an accounting irregularity," I replied. "It's systematic theft, and I've been covering your losses for months, essentially funding my own humiliation while protecting our parents from learning that their trusted son was robbing them blind." The weight of revelation crushed down on all of them simultaneously. Margaret stared at Bradley with horror and betrayal. Robert examined the financial evidence with the methodical precision of someone confirming his worst fears. Bradley looked around desperately for any escape from the trap that had closed around him. But I wasn't finished. The evening had one more twist that would complete the transformation of their understanding. "There's something else you should know," I said, my voice gentle despite the magnitude of what I was about to reveal. "I've been paying your mortgage and utility bills for 2 years through anonymous bank transfers. Every payment you thought you were struggling to make was actually covered by your failure, son. The financial stability you credited to Bradley's leadership was really funded by Theodore, the supposed disappointment." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place with devastating clarity. They sat in stunned silence, processing the complete reversal of everything they had believed about success, failure, family, and love. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. I watched 3 people grapple with the complete inversion of their reality, seeing years of assumptions crumble in real time. Margaret sat motionless, tears streaming down her face as she processed the magnitude of her misjudgment. Robert held the financial documents with trembling hands, his analytical mind struggling to accept what the evidence clearly proved. Bradley stood frozen, his elaborate humiliation plan transformed into his own public destruction. Robert spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. "Theodore, I need to understand something. You've been taking care of us this whole time, while we treated you like garbage," I finished gently. "Yes, Dad. While you called me worthless and stupid, and a disgrace to the Wilson name, I was ensuring you never missed a mortgage payment. While you praised Bradley for saving the company, I was covering his theft and funding every improvement you thought came from his brilliant leadership." Margaret's sobbing intensified. "Oh God, what have we done, Theodore? We're so sorry. We had no idea. We thought—" "You thought I was exactly what you told me I was, a failure who deserved nothing but contempt and rejection. The question is, would you have treated me any differently if you had known the truth from the beginning?" The question hung in the air like a challenge none of them wanted to face. But Bradley, cornered and desperate, launched into a vicious counterattack that revealed the true depth of his character. "This is all manipulation and lies," he shouted, his composure finally cracking completely. "Theodore is a fraud and a liar who's probably stolen money or cheated somehow. Losers don't become billionaires and failures don't transform into investors. This is some elaborate identity theft or confidence scheme designed to destroy our family." He turned to our parents with wild desperation. "Think about it logically. Does Theodore look like a billionaire to you? Does he act like someone who's achieved real success? I've been documenting his poverty for months. I have photographs proving he works at a coffee shop, lives in a slum, and drives a car worth maybe $3,000. Bradley pulled out his phone and began scrolling through the surveillance images he had collected. "Look at these pictures. Here's Theodore scrubbing dishes at that coffee shop. Here he is taking out garbage. Here he is getting into that pathetic Honda. Does this look like someone who owns a $40 million penthouse?" I remained calm while he ranted, understanding that his desperation was making him reveal more about his own character than mine. "Bradley, would you like me to call the coffee shop owner and confirm my employment status? Or perhaps we could visit my penthouse so you can see the reality behind your surveillance photos." "I have a better idea," he snarled. "Let's call the police. Identity theft is a federal crime, and impersonating a business owner is fraud. Theodore is clearly having some kind of psychotic break, and he needs professional help, not encouragement for his delusions." Margaret looked stricken. "Bradley, you can't be serious. Those documents look legitimate, and the financial records—" Can be faked," Bradley interrupted. "Anyone with basic computer skills can create false documents. Theodore probably found some real investors' information online and cobbled together a convincing story. The real Alexander Holdings representative is probably on his way here right now, and when he arrives, Theodore's pathetic charade will be exposed." Robert had been quietly studying the evidence while Bradley ranted. "Son, these bank records appear genuine. The transaction details the routing numbers, the timestamps. Everything seems authentic. How would Theodore fake documentation this complex?" Bradley's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "Because you want to believe it. You're so desperate to not be failures yourselves that you're willing to accept any fantasy that makes Theodore successful. But I know the truth. I've been watching him for months. I know where he lives, where he works, what he drives. The reality is pathetic and sad." "The reality," I said quietly, "is that you've been stalking someone while completely misunderstanding what you were observing. You followed me to businesses I own, photographed vehicles I borrow, and documented activities that were part of maintaining a cover identity. Your surveillance proves nothing except your own inability to recognize what was happening right in front of you." Bradley turned to me with pure hatred in his eyes. "Even if you are telling the truth, which I absolutely refuse to believe, it makes you a monster. You watched us struggle and worry while you had the power to help. You let Mom and Dad stress about money while you lived in luxury. You're a sociopath who tortured his own family for entertainment." The accusation was designed to shift blame and make me the villain regardless of the truth about my success. But it also gave me the opening to reveal the final piece of information that would complete Bradley's destruction. You want to talk about torture. Bradley, let's discuss what you've been telling people around town about my mental health. Should I repeat the conversations where you suggested our parents have me evaluated by psychiatric professionals?" Margaret gasped. "What, Bradley, you didn't?" "Or perhaps we should talk about the elaborate humiliation ceremony you planned for tonight. The presentation comparing my supposed failures with your achievements. The plan to have me serve drinks while you gloated about your success to the mysterious investor who turned out to be me." Robert's face darkened with understanding. "Bradley, is this true? Did you arrange tonight's dinner to humiliate your brother?" Bradley's desperation reached new heights as he realized his cruelty was being exposed, along with his theft. "Everything I did was to help Theodore face reality. He's been living in denial about his failures, refusing to accept help or guidance. Someone needed to shock him into understanding his limitations. By spreading rumors about his mental health." Margaret asked, her voice cold with disapproval. By documenting his poverty and presenting facts instead of enabling delusions, Bradley shot back. Look around this room. Look at Theodore's claims. Does any of this seem remotely plausible to you? Our son, the college dropout, the coffee shop worker, the guy who drives a 15-year-old Honda is secretly a billionaire investor. Come on. I pulled out my phone and made a call on speaker. Frank, it's Theodore. I need you to bring my Tesla up from the garage. Yes, the white roadster. The penthouse garage at Meridian Tower. 20 minutes should be fine. Bradley listened to the conversation with growing horror. That proves nothing. You could be calling anyone and pretending. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. I answered on speaker. Sarah, perfect timing. Yes, they'd like verification. Go ahead and send the ownership documents to my parents' email address. The penthouse deed, the Wilson Dynamics shareholding records, and the Alexander Holdings Incorporation papers. Thank you. Robert's phone chimed with incoming emails. He opened them on his tablet and began reading documents that removed any remaining doubt about my identity and financial status. His face went through several expressions as he processed the evidence. Amazement, pride, shame, and something approaching awe. Margaret, he said quietly, you need to see this. Theodore owns 51% of Wilson Dynamics. He's been the controlling shareholder for 8 months. Every major decision we've made, every contract we've signed, every strategic initiative we've implemented, all of it required his approval. Margaret read over Robert's shoulder, her face reflecting the same emotional journey. This says, Theodore, you could fire anyone in the company, including Bradley, including myself if I chose to. I've had the power to reshape Wilson Dynamics completely, but I preferred to work behind the scenes, allowing you to maintain dignity and autonomy while ensuring the company's success. Bradley made one final desperate play, his voice cracking with panic. Even if all of this is somehow true, Theodore has proven he's vindictive and manipulative. He's been lying to us for years, playing psychological games, setting up elaborate deceptions. How can you trust someone who's capable of such sustained dishonesty? The question struck at the heart of everything that had happened. Margaret and Robert looked at me with confusion, unsure whether to feel grateful for my help or betrayed by my deception. Bradley had found the one argument that might salvage something from his complete humiliation. But he had also given me the opportunity to explain the choice that had defined the last 3 years of my life. You're right about one thing, Bradley. I have been dishonest. I've maintained a false identity and hidden my true circumstances from people I love. The question is whether that dishonesty was justified by what I discovered about how you treat family members you perceive as failures. I turned to address all 3 of them directly. For 5 years you believed I was worthless, and you treated me accordingly. You dismissed my opinions, mocked my ambitions, and made it clear that I had no value in this family. Tonight was supposed to be the ultimate expression of that contempt, a dinner where Bradley would humiliate me in front of the investor who was unknowingly me. Margaret wiped her eyes. Theodore, we thought we were helping you understand reality. Whose reality? The reality where success only comes through paths you approve, where intelligence is measured by institutional credentials rather than actual achievement, where family love is conditional on meeting arbitrary standards of accomplishment. Robert set down the tablet and looked at me with something approaching respect for the first time in years. Son, I'm beginning to understand why you felt the need to test us this way. But surely you can see how confusing and hurtful this revelation is for us as well. I can see that, I agreed. But I need you to understand something. I didn't set out to deceive you for years. I originally planned to reveal my success, gradually helping you accept that your failure son had actually achieved something remarkable. But the more I observed your treatment of unsuccessful Theodore versus your praise for successful Bradley, the more I realized that your love was entirely conditional on achievement. Bradley saw an opening and seized it desperately. So, you admit this whole thing has been a manipulative test designed to make us look bad. You're not a victim, Theodore. You're a puppet master who's been pulling strings and playing psychological games with your own family. The accusation contained enough truth to sting, but it also revealed the fundamental difference between Bradley's approach to problems and mine. Where he saw manipulation, I saw protection. Where he saw games, I saw genuine care expressed through difficult circumstances. But as I prepared to explain my motivations more fully, my phone buzzed with a text message that changed everything. Sarah's message was brief, but devastating. Bradley's theft is worse than we thought. He's been skimming for 3 years, not 18 months. Total amount stolen, $847,000. Also found evidence he's been planning to frame you for the missing money. I read the message twice to make sure I understood its implications. Bradley hadn't just been stealing from the family business, he had been planning to destroy me in the process. The elaborate surveillance, the rumors about my mental health, the systematic documentation of my supposed poverty. It was all preparation for framing me as the embezzler when the theft was inevitably discovered. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My brother hadn't just been cruel or greedy. He had been systematically planning my complete destruction while stealing from our parents and letting me unknowingly cover his crimes through my investments. Bradley, I said, my voice deadly calm, we need to have a very different conversation than the one I planned. I looked at my phone screen one more time, ensuring I had read Sarah's message correctly. $847,000 stolen over 3 years with evidence that Bradley was planning to frame me for the theft. The magnitude of his betrayal went far beyond mere greed. It represented a systematic campaign to destroy me while enriching himself. Before we continue, I said, addressing the room but keeping my eyes on Bradley, I need to share some additional information that changes the nature of tonight's conversation significantly. Bradley sensed danger in my tone and immediately went on the offensive. More lies and manipulation. How many fictional documents are you going to produce? How elaborate is this fantasy you've constructed to avoid facing your own failures? I ignored his desperate bluster and pulled up Sarah's detailed financial analysis on my tablet. Bradley, my forensic accountant has been reviewing Wilson Dynamics books for the past 6 months. Would you like to see what she discovered about your creative approach to company finances? Margaret and Robert both turned to look at Bradley, sensing something ominous in my question. Bradley's face went pale, but he maintained his aggressive stance. Whatever lies your fictional accountant claims to have found, they're fabricated evidence designed to support your elaborate deception. $847,000. I said calmly, showing them detailed spreadsheets and bank records. That's how much you've stolen from Wilson Dynamics over the past 3 years. Not 18 months as I originally calculated, but 36 months of systematic embezzlement designed to fund your lifestyle, while our parents struggled to keep the business afloat. The silence that followed was absolute. Margaret's face went white as she processed the number. Robert reached for the tablet with hands that shook slightly. Bradley looked like he might physically collapse as the foundation of his defense crumbled completely. These documents show fake consulting contracts with companies that don't exist. I continued scrolling through the evidence methodically. Inflated supplier invoices where you pocketed the difference. Fraudulent overtime payments to employees who were never on the payroll, even falsified travel expenses for business trips you never took. Robert studied the bank records with the careful attention of someone who understood financial documentation. These routing numbers. Bradley, these payments went to accounts in your name. How do you explain this? Bradley made one last desperate attempt to maintain his innocence. It's all fabricated. Theodore has had access to the company's computer systems through his investor identity. He could have created false records to frame me for crimes that never happened. This is revenge for years of family disappointment and professional failure. You're right about one thing, I agreed. I have had access to the company's systems. That's how I discovered your theft, and that's how I've been covering your losses for months to protect our parents from bankruptcy. Every dollar you stole was replaced through my anonymous investments. Margaret began crying again, But these tears were different tears of betrayal and heartbreak, as she realized the golden child she had trusted had been systematically robbing the family. "Bradley, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't steal from us while we praised your leadership and trusted your integrity." Bradley's response revealed the depth of his character destruction. Instead of remorse or explanation, he attacked with renewed viciousness. "Even if some money went missing, it's Theodore's fault for creating this whole elaborate deception. If he had been honest about his success from the beginning, none of this would have been necessary. He forced me into desperate measures by refusing to help the family openly." The audacity of blaming me for his theft was staggering, but it got worse as he continued his defense. "Besides, I was planning to pay it all back once the company became more profitable. The money was borrowed, not stolen. I was investing in my future ability to help the family business succeed." "Investing in your Tesla Model S?" I asked. "Your downtown condo, your expensive wardrobe and social life, because that's where the stolen money went. Bradley. Not business investments, but personal luxury while our parents worried about mortgage payments I was secretly covering." Robert had been silent while studying the evidence, but now he looked up with an expression I had never seen before, cold fury mixed with deep disappointment. "Son, these documents are comprehensive and detailed. If Theodore fabricated this evidence, he would have needed access to banking systems, accounting records, and financial institutions that would be impossible to hack or manipulate. More than that," I added, pulling up additional documentation. "Sarah discovered something else during her investigation. Bradley, would you like to explain the detailed plan you developed to frame me for your embezzlement?" The color drained from Bradley's face so completely that he looked like he might faint. Margaret and Robert both turned to stare at him with expressions of horror and disbelief. "What plan?" Margaret whispered. I displayed a series of documents on the tablet screen. Bradley created a comprehensive file documenting my supposed poverty, my work schedule at the coffee shop, my access to company information through family connections, and my alleged resentment about being excluded from the business. He was building a case to present me as the prime suspect when the missing money was eventually discovered. Robert read through the file with growing disgust. This is incredibly detailed. Bradley, you documented your brother's daily routine, his financial struggles, his emotional state. Were you really planning to frame Theodore for your own crimes?" Bradley's response was pure desperation mixed with vindictive cruelty. "Theodore deserved to be investigated. He's been lying about everything, manipulating the family, playing psychological games for years. If money was missing from the company, he should have been the primary suspect based on his behavior patterns and obvious mental instability." "Mental instability?" Margaret asked, her voice dangerous. "I've been documenting Theodore's erratic behavior for months." Bradley continued, seemingly unaware that he was destroying himself with every word. "His refusal to accept help, his delusional beliefs about his own abilities, his antisocial tendencies and inability to maintain normal relationships. I was preparing to suggest psychiatric evaluation when the embezzlement investigation began." The room fell silent except for Bradley's heavy breathing. He had just admitted to 3 years of theft planning to frame his innocent brother and attempting to have me declared mentally incompetent to deflect attention from his own crimes. Margaret spoke first, her voice carrying a coldness I had never heard from her. "Bradley, get out of my house." "Mom, you don't understand." "Get out," she repeated, her voice rising. "Get out before I call the police myself. You stole from your own family, you tried to destroy your brother, and you've been lying to us for years. I don't want to see your face right now." Robert stood up and walked to the window, his shoulders slumped with the weight of discovering that his golden child was a criminal, and his supposed failure son was a billionaire philanthropist. "Theodore," he said without turning around. "What happens now? Do you press charges? Do you fire him from the company? Do you expose this publicly?" The questions hung in the air like smoke from a burning bridge. I had the power to destroy Bradley completely, criminal prosecution, public humiliation, financial ruin, social exile. Everything he had planned to do to me could be visited upon him with interest. The justice would be poetic and absolute. But as I looked at my parents' faces, seeing the pain and confusion and desperate hope for some kind of resolution that didn't destroy the family completely, I realized that revenge wasn't what I wanted. What I wanted was transformation and healing, not just for myself, but for all of us. Bradley, I said, my voice calm and controlled, you have two choices. You can leave now and never contact this family again, in which case I will pursue criminal charges and civil recovery for every penny you stole, or you can sit down and listen to what I'm prepared to offer instead. Bradley looked around the room desperately, seeing no allies, no escape routes, no options except the ones I was providing. He sank into a chair like a man accepting his execution. I'm prepared to offer you a junior position at Wilson Dynamics with a salary sufficient to live modestly while you repay every dollar you stole. You'll attend counseling to address whatever psychological issues led you to betray your own family. You'll publicly acknowledge your theft and apologize to our parents for the pain you've caused, and you'll spend the next 5 years proving that you can be the brother and son this family deserves. Margaret looked at me with amazement. Theodore, after everything he's done to you, to us you're willing to offer him redemption instead of revenge. I'm offering him the same thing I wanted from all of you, a chance to be valued for who he could become, rather than condemned for who he has been. The difference is that his redemption comes with consequences and accountability that mine never received. Bradley stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it gratitude, resentment, or simply exhaustion? Why would you do this? I tried to destroy you. I stole from our parents. I planned to frame you for my crimes. Why not just crush me the way you could? Because crushing people doesn't heal families, Bradley. It just creates more pain and more broken relationships. I'm not interested in destroying you. I'm interested in finding out if the brother I grew up loving is still somewhere inside the person who's been stealing and lying and planning my destruction. Robert turned from the window and looked at both of his sons, the billionaire he had rejected and the criminal he had praised. Theodore, I don't know how to process everything that's happened tonight, but I know that what you're offering Bradley is more grace than most people would show after such betrayal. Grace isn't about what people deserve, I replied. It's about what kind of person you choose to be when you have the power to help or hurt others. I've spent 3 years watching this family from the shadows. Now I want to spend time rebuilding it in the light. Bradley's shoulders began to shake and I realized he was crying. Not the tears of a man caught in wrongdoing, but the tears of someone who had carried guilt and fear for so long that relief felt overwhelming. Theodore, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for stealing, for lying, for trying to hurt you. I don't understand why I became someone so terrible, but I want to find my way back to being your brother again. Margaret moved to sit beside Bradley, not offering comfort exactly, but not abandoning him either. All of us need to find our way back to being a family again. We've all made mistakes, though yours were certainly the most serious. What happens tomorrow? Robert asked. How do we move forward from here? I had been thinking about that question for months, preparing for various scenarios, but never quite imagining tonight's particular combination of revelation, betrayal, and potential reconciliation. Tomorrow, I officially reveal my identity as Alexander Holdings' representative and take active control of Wilson Dynamics. Bradley begins his supervised rehabilitation program, and we start the long process of learning how to be a family that chooses love over judgment, truth over pretense, and healing over revenge. The evening was far from over, but the foundation for transformation had been laid. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as we worked to rebuild relationships damaged by years of misunderstanding and recent revelations of betrayal. But for the first time in years, I felt hope that the Wilson family might actually become a family worth belonging to. 6 months later, I sat in my corner office at Wilson Dynamics watching the sunrise paint the city skyline in shades of gold and amber. The nameplate on my desk read, Theodore Wilson, Chief Executive Officer. But more importantly, it represented the end of a journey that began with family rejection and led to something I had never expected: genuine reconciliation built on truth rather than pretense. The transformation hadn't been easy or immediate. Those first weeks after the revelation were filled with difficult conversations, painful acknowledgments, and the slow work of rebuilding trust that had been shattered by years of deception and betrayal. But the foundation we had laid that night in my parents' dining room proved strong enough to support the weight of honest relationship. Margaret knocked on my office door and entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee, a morning ritual we had established once she began working as Wilson Dynamics Director of Community Relations. Her role involved connecting the company with local charities and educational initiatives, work that gave her a sense of purpose she had never found in traditional retirement. "Good morning, son," she said, setting 1 cup on my desk and settling into the chair across from me. "How did the Seattle presentation go yesterday?" "Better than expected. The aerospace contract will add $32 million in revenue over the next 18 months, and they're interested in expanding our partnership to include their satellite division." I sipped the coffee gratefully, appreciating both the beverage and the normalcy of sharing morning updates with my mother. "Your father will be pleased. He's been working with the engineering team on those satellite component specifications for weeks." Margaret smiled with genuine pride, not the forced enthusiasm she had once shown for Bradley's supposed achievements, but authentic appreciation for meaningful work accomplished by people she had learned to see clearly. Robert had embraced his new role as senior engineering consultant with unexpected enthusiasm. Free from the pressure of running a struggling company, he had rediscovered his passion for innovative manufacturing techniques and spent his days mentoring young engineers while developing solutions to complex technical challenges. The man who had once dismissed my unconventional approach to success now delighted in pushing boundaries and exploring possibilities. "Speaking of your father, he wanted me to remind you about dinner Sunday. Bradley will be joining us, and Robert is cooking his famous barbecue ribs." Margaret's voice carried a note of cautious optimism when she mentioned Bradley, reflecting the complex emotions we all felt about his gradual rehabilitation. Bradley's journey back to trustworthiness had been the most challenging aspect of our family's healing process. True to the agreement we had reached that traumatic evening, he had entered intensive counseling to address the psychological issues that had led him to betray his family so systematically. The theft, it turned out, had been symptoms of deeper problems: gambling addiction, social anxiety, and a desperate need for external validation that had driven him to maintain an expensive lifestyle he couldn't afford. "How is he doing with the repayment schedule?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from my weekly reviews of company financial statements. "He's never missed a payment, even when it means living very modestly. Last month he paid an extra $500 because he said he wanted to finish the restitution process sooner rather than later." Margaret's tone suggested cautious approval rather than enthusiastic forgiveness, which seemed appropriate given the magnitude of Bradley's betrayal. Under the terms of his rehabilitation agreement, Bradley worked as a junior operations analyst, a position that gave him meaningful responsibilities, while ensuring he had no access to financial systems or decision-making authority. His salary was sufficient for basic living expenses while requiring him to contribute 60% of his income to repaying the stolen money. More importantly, he had embraced the accountability and supervision with genuine remorse rather than resentful compliance. The counseling had revealed that Bradley's theft and cruelty toward me had stemmed from his own deep insecurity about living up to Robert and Margaret's expectations. Ironically, while I had been struggling with rejection and dismissal, Bradley had been suffocating under pressure to be perfect and successful in narrowly defined ways. His criminal behavior had been a desperate attempt to maintain an image of success while dealing with profound feelings of inadequacy. "I'm proud of how he's handling the consequences," Margaret continued. "It would have been easier to disappear and start over somewhere else, but he chose to stay and face what he had done. That takes courage, even if it took him too long to find it." Our family Sunday dinners had become sacred time, carefully protected from business discussions or external pressures. We played board games, shared stories about our week, and slowly learned how to enjoy each other's company without the toxic dynamics that had poisoned our relationships for years. Bradley's participation remained somewhat tentative, but his genuine efforts to rebuild trust were gradually paying dividends in small moments of connection and understanding. My assistant knocked and entered with the day's schedule and a stack of documents requiring review and signature. Sarah Chen had been instrumental in managing the transition from secret investor to public CEO, handling everything from media relations to legal documentation with her characteristic efficiency and discretion. "The quarterly board meeting is at 10, Sarah reported, followed by lunch with the Milwaukee procurement team. "The environmental sustainability presentation is scheduled for 2 o'clock, and you have a conference call with the Tokyo partners at 4. Also, the local newspaper wants to schedule an interview about your philanthropy initiatives." The philanthropic work had become one of the most rewarding aspects of my new public role. Using my wealth openly, rather than secretly, allowed me to support causes that mattered to me, while encouraging other successful individuals to consider their own responsibilities to the community. The Theodore Wilson Foundation focused on educational opportunities for disadvantaged young people, particularly those interested in technology and entrepreneurship. "Schedule the newspaper interview for next week," I replied. "I want to focus on the mentorship program rather than personal success stories. The kids we're helping deserve the spotlight, not me." After Sarah left and Margaret returned to her own office, I spent a few quiet minutes reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. The pain of family rejection had been real and deep, but it had also forced me to discover my own strength and capabilities in ways that easy acceptance might never have achieved. The deception and secrecy that followed had been necessary for protection, but ultimately proved less valuable than the honest relationships we were building now. The transformation hadn't been limited to family dynamics. Wilson Dynamics itself had evolved from a struggling manufacturing company into a technology leader that attracted talent and contracts from around the world. By combining traditional manufacturing expertise with cutting-edge artificial intelligence and automation, we had created something unique in the industry, a company that honored its history while embracing innovation. More importantly, the company culture reflected the lessons our family had learned about judging people by their potential rather than their past performance. We hired based on curiosity and determination, rather than just credentials, promoted based on results rather than politics, and created an environment where mistakes were learning opportunities rather than career-ending failures. My phone buzzed with a text from Bradley. "Finished the quarterly efficiency report early, found some interesting patterns in the supply chain data that might save us money. Would you have time to review it this afternoon?" The message represented everything I had hoped for in his rehabilitation. Rather than doing the minimum required work, Bradley had begun approaching his responsibilities with genuine engagement and initiative. His insights were often valuable, informed by his deep understanding of company operations and his newfound commitment to contributing rather than exploiting. I replied, "Absolutely. Can you present your findings at the 3 o'clock staff meeting? I think the whole team would benefit from your analysis." 6 months ago, that exchange would have been impossible, not just because Bradley would have been too proud to work in a junior position, but because I wouldn't have trusted his motivations or competence. The slow process of earning back trust had required patience and consistency from both of us, but it was producing genuine results. Robert appeared in my doorway carrying a folder of engineering specifications and wearing the expression of someone who had solved a particularly challenging puzzle. "Son, I think we've figured out how to reduce manufacturing costs by 18% while actually improving quality standards. Would you like to see the prototype C-Series? Absolutely. Show me what you've discovered." We spent the next hour reviewing his innovative approach to precision manufacturing, a conversation that would have been impossible during my years as the family disappointment, but felt natural now that we had learned to value capability over credentials. Robert's engineering brilliance had been suppressed for years by administrative responsibilities and financial pressure, but his consulting role allowed him to focus on what he did best. As the morning progressed and the office filled with the productive energy of a successful company, I reflected on the profound life lesson this experience had taught me. True success wasn't about proving others wrong or achieving revenge against people who had hurt me. It was about using whatever capabilities you possess to create value for others while staying authentic to your own principles and values. I could have destroyed my family financially and emotionally. I had the power and arguably the justification to crush people who had treated me badly and betrayed my trust. But destruction would have left me wealthy and alone, surrounded by the wreckage of relationships that could have been healed instead of abandoned. The choice to pursue transformation rather than revenge had required patience, vulnerability, and the willingness to risk being hurt again, but it had produced something far more valuable than vindication. Genuine love based on truth rather than pretense, respect earned through character rather than demanded through fear, and the deep satisfaction of helping people become better versions of themselves. As the afternoon sun slanted through my office windows, I realized that my journey from family disappointment to billionaire CEO had been less important than my evolution from someone seeking approval to someone capable of offering grace. The money and business success mattered, but they were tools for building the kind of life and relationships that made wealth meaningful rather than empty. The foundation I had established wasn't just financial, it was relational and emotional, built on the understanding that people are capable of growth and change when they're given reasons to hope rather than reasons to fear. Bradley's transformation from embezzler to trusted colleague, my parents' evolution from judgmental critics to supportive partners, and my own growth from hidden benefactor to open leader all testified to the power of choosing healing over revenge. The final board meeting of the day concluded with unanimous approval for expansion into international markets, a decision that would have been impossible when Wilson Dynamics was struggling under Bradley's theft and my parents' outdated business model. But the real victory wasn't the financial success, it was walking out of that meeting, to find Bradley waiting in my office with his efficiency report, excited to share insights that would benefit the company we were all committed to building together. "Theodore," Bradley said as I reviewed his analysis, "I know I can never fully repay what I stole, not just the money but the trust and security I took from our parents, the pain I caused you, the years of family harmony I destroyed. But I want you to know that every day I'm here, every project I work on, every small contribution I make, it's all aimed at trying to become worthy of the grace you showed me. Bradley, you don't have to earn worthiness. You just have to choose to be worthy going forward. The past is finished, but the future is ours to build together." As evening approached and the office began to empty, I stood at my window watching employees head home to their families, many of them thinking about problems we would solve together tomorrow and opportunities we might create next month. The view reminded me that success isn't ultimately about individual achievement. It's about creating environments where people can thrive and contribute and find meaning in their work. The journey from family disappointment to successful CEO had taught me that vindication feels hollow without relationship, that wealth means nothing without people to share it with, and that the greatest victories come not from defeating enemies, but from transforming them into allies. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do with success is use it to lift others up rather than put them down. Tonight I would join my family for dinner, not as the hidden benefactor watching from the shadows, but as Theodore, the son and brother valued for who I had become, rather than condemned for who I used to be. We would share a meal prepared with love, conversation filled with respect, and the comfortable knowledge that we had chosen transformation over destruction, healing over revenge, and grace over judgment. That choice had made all the difference. Before I share a final thought, I want to ask you something that might resonate with your own experiences. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had the power to seek revenge against people who hurt or underestimated you? What did you choose to do with that power? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our experiences helps others navigate similar challenges in their own lives. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own family dynamics, please consider hitting the like button and sharing it with someone who might benefit from hearing about the power of choosing grace over revenge. And if you want to see more stories about transformation, redemption, and the complex relationships that shape our lives, don't forget to subscribe for new content every week. Thank you for taking this journey with me through the Wilson family's struggles and ultimate healing. May you find the courage to choose transformation over destruction in your own life. And may you discover that the greatest victories often come not from proving others wrong, but from helping them become the people they were meant to be. Until next time, remember that success without relationship is empty, but success used to build bridges and heal wounds can transform not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you.